know how many different species of butterflies that there are in the United States? I checked it out. There are 750 different butterflies in the United States. And then around the world, we'd have to add a whole another 1,000 over another. So that makes 1,750 different species of butterflies. But guess what? Each one is still a butterfly. And so as we are trying to consider what we are to become, what God has designed us to become, something is very clear. We are called to be followers of Jesus. But though the way that we all live that out as followers of Jesus isn't identical to one another, there are differences in how we live out our life as a follower of Jesus. But no matter how we live out our lives as followers of Jesus, different from each other, one thing is still true. There is a requirement of transformation in our lives. Now, this transformation process that takes place for a caterpillar, it happens in what's called a chrysalis. The chrysalis is what protects the caterpillar as it is being transformed into the butterfly. We as followers of Jesus also have a place that is designed and made to protect us as we transform into what God designed us to be. That protective place is the church. The church was designed to be the place that protects you as you become what God has designed you to become. But for far too many, the church has been unbecoming. Now, when you think of the word unbecoming, what it means is it's something that is not becoming, but really unbecoming is referencing something that is unattractive, something that detracts from the character of what it is about. And so when the church is unbecoming, it means it detracts from what we are designed to become, followers of Jesus. But I think we can actually change this. I think we can make the church, again, a place that protects people, doesn't isolate people. A place where people can follow Jesus and become who they're designed to become because they're in a place that protects them, called the church. You know why I think we can change this? It's because the church isn't a place. It's a people. We're the church. And so we can make it a place that protects people, doesn't isolate people, protects people, doesn't divide people. We can be that chrysalis for the transformation that God wants in all of our lives. What's more is that for a caterpillar to become a butterfly, everything that it needs is already inside of it. To be transformed into that butterfly, all the information is contained inside, and bit by bit, that information comes out, and that material and whatnot comes out of it to transform it into the butterfly. And when you and I are reborn as followers of Jesus, guess what? Everything that we need to become what God designed us to become is inside of us. The information is inside of us, and bit by bit, we can allow that to come out of us through Jesus, and it can transform us as well. While butterflies transform inside of a chrysalis, some would want to try to compare that transformation to what happens to bears and bats and other animals while they hibernate. But hibernation is just a method that is used to survive when food is scarce. It's just a method that is used to use as little energy as possible. That is not what transformation in a chrysalis is about. It's not what transformation for you is about. It's actually something more. We are called not to hibernate, but to be transformed. We are called not to survive, but to thrive. We are called to use energy, not store energy. Use that energy to transform into what God has designed us to become, not to sit back and get lazy and wait for the winter to be done. Paul was wanting the Galatians, who were trying to become less than what they were called to become, to go from surviving to thriving. And so Paul told them about his own journey in chapter 1 of Galatians. And then in chapter 2, he helped them in seeing how he wanted the gospel message to stay true and not become unbecoming. Paul didn't want his message of the gospel to be something that detracted from the life of Jesus and the message of Jesus. And so Paul in chapter 2 tells us how he goes to the early church leaders in Jerusalem Why? Because he wants to find agreement with them. You know, it's interesting today more than ever, finding agreement with someone seems to be very difficult and very hard. Now, think about whether or not you are a Republican or a Democrat. Think about what ethnicity that you are. Think about all the different issues we see around us today. So many times we're not coming to find agreement. Instead, we're trying to come and make our point. And Paul, I love this, that Paul, because he wanted the gospel to be not to be unbecoming, but something that showed us what we were to become, he made a point to find agreement with the early church leaders in Jerusalem. I want to encourage you to find a place of agreement with those around you so that the gospel inside of you that is transforming you can transform them as well. And we can make that transformation something that isn't unbecoming, but something that we're becoming even more like God, more like Jesus. Being in agreement with the early church leaders was so important to Paul. Do you know why? It's because Paul was reaching non-Jews. He was reaching Gentiles. And Gentiles, historically, they were responsible for so much that happened to the Jews. It was Gentiles. They were the ones that were responsible for putting the Jews in slavery. But it was the Jews that went into the Promised Land and conquered and defeated Gentiles. But then it was Gentiles that took the Jews and exiled them to other lands. And it was Gentiles who were dominating and conquering and leading the Jews in that day. And now Paul wants to let them invade their religion too. You could see how this idea of agreement was so important to Paul. So what was happening with the Gentiles could have been viewed as a dangerous thing for Jews. So Paul made a point to go and have that agreement with them. And then the point that he wanted to make sure was true is that the gospel message stayed true to what it was. And the gospel message is this, that it is inclusive to all people, not exclusive to the Jews. It's inclusive to all people. Now that's not saying that the way to Jesus, the way to heaven is inclusive in that it is many ways. We know that John 14:6 tells us that Jesus says that I am the way, the truth, and life. No one can come to the Father except through me. And so the way is exclusive, but the message is inclusive. And so the message of the gospel was it is for all people as long as they have faith in Jesus. What's so great is that Paul's encounter with Peter and the other early church leaders is beautiful. They come into agreement. They do agree that the gospel message, the true gospel message, is one that is inclusive, that it includes the Gentiles, and it is not exclusively for the Jews, that it is for all people, and that if you are not a Jew, you should be excited about that. And if you are a Jew, you should be excited about that, that the message of Jesus, the gospel message, is for everyone and anyone. And that's what makes the second part of Galatians chapter 2 so interesting, in that we see Peter come to be with Paul in Galatia, and we see them have an issue. We would think that the issue is that Peter is he's focusing on obeying the law and not his faith in Jesus, and that's an issue, but it's not the only issue. Part of the issue is an issue of racism. Part of that issue of racism is something that actually is there that Peter deals with. Now, I'm not saying that Peter was a racist. What I am saying is that Peter was dealing with an issue of racism in this moment. Because anytime someone of a different culture, of a different race, of a different color, of a different ideology, a different socioeconomic status, whatever it is, when we make this choice to do something and separate, purposely separate from another culture, another race, another color, that is a form of racism. And so we got to address that, and we got to see that. And this is what I love about Paul. Paul sees this, and he doesn't sit idly by. He actually confronts Peter. Could you imagine confronting Peter? All right? Peter, the one who walked on water. Peter, who was the one who saw 3,000 people get saved in one day. Peter is the one who Paul confronts. I'm so grateful that Paul would call it out like he does. And that's what we need to do as a church. When we see things that are wrong, we need to make sure that we do call it out, that we do confront, because we don't want to be unbecoming. We want to become what God has designed us to become. The church is the place, remember, where we should be protected, not isolated. The church is the place where, yes, we should be convicted of our sin, but we should not be condemned for our place in the process of our transformation. The church is the place where Jesus wants you to know that his message of the gospel is inclusive to all, not exclusive to some, and that everyone can come to know Jesus. And that's why it was so important that Paul addressed Peter's issue, because racism is contrary to the gospel. Anything is contrary to the gospel if it is not inclusive to all and it is exclusive only to some. And the gospel message is clear in Galatians 2:20. My old self has been crucified with Christ. It is no longer I who live, but Christ lives in me. So I live in this earthly body by trusting in the Son of God who loved me and gave himself for me. Paul began the transformation process when he put his faith in Jesus. Peter began the transformation process when he put his faith in Jesus. You and I began the transformation process when we put our faith in Jesus. And that's the true message of the gospel, that anyone can become a follower of Jesus when they put their faith in Jesus. Anything less and anything more would simply be unbecoming.